So anybody who has, oh, by the way, before I get into this next section, any any questions about the previous section? Anything that didn't make sense or yeah, anything?
Makes sense.
Okay. We'll delve into the next section and we have what about half hour, right? Yeah. Okay. So anybody who's struggled with weight and has looked at their friends who can eat so much more, has to think about, okay, what is it about me that makes me struggle so much and gain weight more easily? Why am I hungry? Is there something to do with, hormones? Is it something in brain chemistry? And what about feeling satisfied? What about feeling full? How does this all enter into the equation? So, and what about eating for a lot of other reasons besides just being stomach growling hungry? Um, that certainly characterizes a lot of what we do, eating for stress and or eating to relieve stress. And food does have that effect. Carbohydrates can increase serotonin levels and make us feel a little bit more relaxed. It's a way of decompressing after a hard day, after decompressing after work. There's nothing inherently awful about that. It can be part of a normal pattern that you're going to treat yourself with particular food. Um, but it can like so many other good things, it can get out of hand too as well. So we'll talk about some of those things. So lots of reasons to eat, quote unquote reasons, where that are not related to hunger per se. Everything from boredom, or I will eat something when I don't want to do a task. Like if I don't want to work on this talk, I'm going to get something to eat. I think that's really stupid. That doesn't make any sense at all. Such a delaying tactic. Fatigue, your resistance to certain foods is always down when you're fatigued. And I, I think that we have in the back of our mind that food is going to make us feel better and less tired, but it really doesn't have that effect. It may make us feel more calmer or something, but it doesn't necessarily relieve fatigue. May relieve stress. We can use food to relax. Sometimes we get signals mixed up, like you're really thirsty, but you eat something instead, um, or to celebrate, to be social. Um, there's lots of situations and times that are associated with overeating. Um, what is interesting about this topic, though, too, is just realizing that it's more than just that sense of fullness. For example, you can eat something like a high fiber cereal, and you can feel full, but you're still hungry. Your mind is still hungry for something that actually tastes good. So, so what is the difference between fullness and satiety, and how do we integrate those? Um, so these particular appetite hormones were discovered in the 1990s. So um, ghrelin and leptin are the two main ones. Ghrelin, an excess of ghrelin can lead to overeating. Ghrelin is a hunger stimulating hormone. It tells your brain that it's time to eat. It rises before meals. It drops after meals. Um, and you would think that, like with excess weight, that ghrelin levels um, would be really high. This kind of drive to eat. But in fact, they are somewhat lower, but people are less sensitive to them. So so appetite hormones are interesting in that it's not just the absolute amount of the hormone that's there, but how sensitive is your body to the hormone. We're only kind of starting to look at this. Um, On the other hand, in people who have this rare disorder, Prader-Willi syndrome, this is a disorder where it's a genetic disorder where people have an insatiable appetite and foods need to be locked up, literally. I mean, they continually keep eating. Um, and their ghrelin levels are quite high. So this, drive to eat. So it'll be interesting to follow this and see what happens. Leptin, on the other hand, is a hormone that's produced by fat cells, and it works to suppress appetite. And leptin was the first of these that was discovered. And I remember when that happened, and people thought, oh, all we have to do is take leptin, and we won't eat as much. And it just didn't work that way. So it's definitely more complex than that. But I used this example before. Being full and being satisfied are not exactly the same thing. Also, I just wanted to say, I'll get into that later. Researchers believe that the highly palatable foods that we have now in our diet tends to disrupt our sense of fullness and our sense of satisfaction to some extent. Foods used to be, more whole and to some extent a little bit plainer, a little bit more, I don't know how to describe it exactly. But you know what I mean, though? It's hard to just keep on eating certain foods that are just plain foods. Like it's hard to keep on eating boiled potatoes, but potato chips, you could eat a lot more. Yeah. I mean, so we have these inherent things that encourage us to eat more and more. And whereas in an environment where the food supply was not so palatable, not so generous, not so varied, not so all these other things, we had a few more breaks set into our overall caloric intake. And what has happened now is that these breaks of looking or tuning into how you feel, tuning into your sense of fullness, it's more like a whisper. It's more like a whisper. And the sense of trying to eat more palatable foods is like a roar, a shout. So it tends to override those signals, and that's why we always want to be aware that you want to be aware that you're getting full, but for most people, you can override that. You can be stuffed after Thanksgiving, but you still have room for pie.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a perfect example. So we always have room for something more, and it's hard to, it takes practice to read those internal signals. But some cultures do it naturally, like they have like they determine fullness by being about 80% full. Or you could determine satisfaction in other ways too, like just not being hungry, not being stuffed, but just not being hungry anymore. Those are two vastly different things. Something else I was going to say about that, I forgot. Okay. So, and I was going to say, so yes, it's good to tune into those inner feelings, to those inner perceptions. But that's one of the reasons I think, as we'll see in the National Weight Control Registry, that one of the top things that people do these are people who have lost at least 30 pounds and have kept it off for at least a year, but they weigh themselves regularly. And, it's not that they're developing an eating disorder, but it's like they need this external check-in. And because I think in our society, it's not enough to just go by how you feel. You need to have something that's a little bit more concrete, and think of it as a number. It's like someone who needs to monitor their blood pressure or take their blood sugar. It's just a number. It doesn't have to become an obsession. But I really think that's an interesting finding from that group of people.
In Cook County at this time of year, the produce selection, quality, and variety start severely diminishing.
Hmm.
And you made that comment earlier about visiting your sister in California and saying, if I had produce that tasted like this,
Mm-hmm.
I'd eat a whole lot more.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem in this county and also probably
Mm-hmm.
in this tier of the country,
Mm-hmm.
where so many months of the year
Mm-hmm.
getting tasty
Mm-hmm.
produce is hard.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. And and with produce, we'll talk a minute about caloric density of food. And produce has a really low caloric density, and that's why I think one of the things regarding the plate method is so valuable. That half the plate is those lower calorie vegetables. But you're absolutely right, and uh, it that's a real concern. I know that I have some patients who go shopping in Duluth and go to a store where they can get a big poly bag of vegetables, and it's not the same as getting fresh vegetables, but at least you have more vegetables and more of a variety available. But yeah, I think it's really a valid point.
Yeah.
Very good. I like us digressing a little bit, but I like those bags of salad where everything is in it. Because I find that I don't waste as much, and I've got some nuts and seeds and just the right amount, and I'm not throwing away a big bag of spinach. I like those. Whoever invented that, but do you have those up here?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's something. The other thing too is you can look at getting vegetables too in other forms that maybe aren't as tasty, but at least you're getting them, and that would be like starting out with a plainer soup and adding vegetables to them, or adding more vegetables to something like chili or so. Yeah.
What about drinking a V8?
Yeah.
Would that satisfy the requirement of
Yeah.
vegetables?
Yeah, that would be great.
Isn't that high in sodium though?
Some are. They have some lower sodium versions. Yeah. Yep. That's a really good idea. Okay. So in pleasure in eating incorporates taste, smell, mouthfeel of things, appearance, all of these things that food manufacturers are just so good at making them, ever so tasty. And it tends to confuse our normal limits a little bit. So true hunger versus mind hunger. Fullness and satiety, we tend to use those, like even in the literature, they use those words somewhat interchangeably. But another way to look at it is, and some other things that you see written, is that fullness is the feeling that you have within a meal. Are you, physically feeling full from that meal? And satiety is the ability to sustain a sense of satisfaction until the next time that you eat. So, and there are some things that help both of those. Fullness is having foods with a lower caloric density. Satiety, protein, for example, of all the nutrients of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, calorie for calorie, protein has the greatest gives you the greatest sense of satiety. So that's why having some protein at every meal and distributing protein throughout the day, it not only allows your body to use protein more effectively, to use it for those bodybuilding tissue repair purposes, but it also enables you to feel a little bit more satisfied from meal to meal. And that is, calorie for calorie. Because you could say, oh, fat makes me feel really satisfied, which is true, but fat is so much more calorically dense, so that's why it doesn't make the grade there. So anyway, it's kind of interesting. I think, yeah, okay. So when I was doing a review of the literature, I found a lot of interesting things, and so I summarized a couple of them from some studies that I read. And one was they looked at high protein diets and found that they did make people feel more satisfied, that sense of satiety, but it didn't necessarily reduce calories. So again, it's confounding. And I think that really points out to that, even though a person can be more satisfied, if there's something good to eat in front of you, you can still find, room for it or reason to eat it. And that's why the environment is so important. We feel like eating when we see foods, when we smell foods. And that's why at home you want to keep foods hidden, and even the toaster off the counter, lest we think about making toast. And the mixer put away, lest I think about making cookies. So, all of those things, we are very subtly and not so subtly influenced by our environment and what's available. And it's good to break the chain of some of these things early on, like breaking the chain of having a lot of, good calorie dense sweet foods, for example, things that really taste good, cookies, pies, cakes, candy, and so on. Breaking the chain, and also chips and snack foods. That would be right at the grocery store. Don't bring it into your house. Once it's into your house, it's fair game. So that's like the first part of the chain. The last part of the chain is where you're actually eating it. Or when the middle part is when you're feeling bored and you're looking for something to eat. So, the earlier on you can break that, the better. There are some interesting things too about like adding fiber to foods. What does that do in terms of feeling full versus having a food that inherently has fiber in it? So those are some questions that still need to be answered. Okay, then we're going to talk a little bit about energy density of selected foods, because I think this can be an important component in helping to control weight. So this is just arithmetic, but I'll try not to get bogged down in it. If you look at what a food weighs versus the calories in the food, that is what we mean by energy density. And so something like butter, it has a lot of calories per weight. So that's like the extreme. And then you can see going up the ladder, less calories per weight. It in a practical way. So for example, this is why if a person eats a lot of these lightweight snack foods, we eat partly to the weight of food as human beings. So we're definitely influenced by the weight of food. So here we have something that weighs an ounce, so 28 grams, and it has 140 calories. So it has about 5, right around 5 calories per gram. And you compare that to another food like this yogurt, where it weighs 150 grams and it has 120 calories. It doesn't even have 1-to-1. It's actually a little bit lower than that. So including more foods like this in the diet, or at least being aware of them, can help you feel more satisfied with less calories.
Yeah, but the Doritos taste better.
I know.
They have that crunch,
Yeah,
whereas yogurt doesn't
Yeah.
have any crunch to it.
yeah, yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're looking at things all together, because that's lemon meringue and not plain yogurt, there's 15 grams of sugar, and the Doritos have 0 grams of sugar.
Yeah,
So
See, that's why I would eat the Doritos right there.
right there. Okay, you can take it one step further.
So if you
What
have plain yogurt with
Yeah,
nuts in it, or you put
fruit in it.
fruit in it, or you put a bunch of spices in it,
Yeah.
the spices will give you interesting
Yeah.
flavor. Put in cinnamon and nutmeg,
Mm-hmm.
or pumpkin pie spice.
Mm-hmm. Another thing we probably are seeing it now, the difference between sugar on the label and added sugar. Because in a milk product, what's considered sugar is lactose. It's a disaccharide, so it's listed as sugar. So if you looked at a carton of milk, it would say something like 12 grams of 12 grams of carbohydrate, 12 grams of sugar. So that's, so if you're trying to avoid sugar, it's sort of it's not really like it has sweetener added. It's part of the product, and but that's why with the newer labeling, you'll be able to see like naturally occurring sugars versus ones that are added to the food, which I think that's good. I think that's good. But yeah, point is.
Are they any healthier, like the sugar in milk?
Oh,
Still sugar.
well, it's part of what we consider milk. I mean, milk wouldn't be milk without lactose in it. Yeah, I mean, it's just part of it. Yeah, so go ahead.
So on the label for the yogurt,
Mhm.
then it says sugars. Is there no added sugars in there then? If
There's
that's,
added sugar.
A little bit, because the total carbs is 19, so the sugars are counted. The sugars are counted in the total carb, so you can kind of surmise by that that there's some additional, like say, the sugars are kind of a combination of some added sugars and the lactose itself.
Aren't the new labels that they're phasing in
Mhm.
gonna have that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, they are. Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. So that's one example. And, ways of incorporating that thought to other foods, adding more to pasta, adding more to starchy foods of these lower density things. It's not the total answer, nothing's a total answer, but like if you like Doritos, you like Doritos, and but it is a way for people, for example, to have potatoes or to have pasta and to feel like they're getting a reasonable serving. Like right now, like if you had a third of a cup of pasta or a third of a cup of rice, that's considered 80 calories, and it's considered one carbohydrate choice in when you're looking at carbohydrates for a diabetic type of diet. So those aren't very big portions at all, but this is a way of, some way of making them a little bit larger. Or here we have the fruit in yogurt or nuts in yogurt too. Other examples are reduced fat ricotta with some toppings, making some snack foods, making your own kind of snack foods, like not ones that you would just buy in a bag, and making them to be a little bit healthier, I think is another way to go. So moving along, getting towards the end here, I believe. So some of the tips from the National Weight Control Registry. This is a study that has been going on for a long time now, and people are they're kind of self-reporting. They've volunteered to be part of this study, and the characteristics that they have to have is that they've lost 30 pounds and kept it off for at least a year. I'm not positive, but I believe people who've had bariatric surgery are excluded from this group. I think these are, not positive about that, but I think so. So they interviewed them about, what their behaviors are, what they do. Are you acquainted with this study? Have you? Okay. I was just curious. Good. Something new. So I think all of these points are really interesting. For example, they tend to eat the same or very close to the same way. So Thanksgiving is coming up. They have that element of restraint. They might have something of everything, but they don't go completely overboard. I think that's really important because there's so many reasons to overeat in our society. There's so many reasons to celebrate. And so developing, that element of, okay, I got to put the brakes on this, and really surveying what's available and doing what's right for them and not feeling pressured to eat just because it's there. They ate breakfast every day, weighed themselves at least once a week, they watched less TV. And this was really something that they exercised about an hour a day. A lot of them went for a walk, an hour a day. So yeah, pretty amazing. And then beyond the National Weight Control Registry, just other things to do, get sufficient rest and exercise, because not getting enough rest can increase those stress hormones, and that can lead somebody to overeat as well. And then be aware of that term moderation. Mm-hmm. It means something different to everybody. We use it all the time. I mean, you always say, yeah, that's okay, you can have it in moderation. What does that mean? It's different for everybody. We all have our sense of what moderation is. Remember too that it's the first taste of things and the last taste of things that have the most satisfaction. So that's the reason why if you go to Dairy Queen, you might have close to as much satisfaction having a small sundae as you do a really large sundae. I had a friend, we went hiking together, and he always ordered we had to remain calorie neutral. So that was our reason to stop at Dairy Queen. We expended all this energy, and therefore we needed to take in some energy. But he always ordered, he was watching his weight, he always ordered a medium sundae, and I said, well, why don't you get a small sundae? He said, yeah, I suppose I could try that. And I said, if you aren't satisfied with a small sundae, you could get another small sundae. Never happened. We hiked the entire Superior hiking trail together. Never happened. Never needed enough. So it really shows you that, portion sizes you can be satisfied with smaller amounts. Plan meals ahead, write down what you might eat, have a game plan in mind. I have a patient who's lost weight who's done really well allotting a certain number of calories per meal. Plate method is always great. Eat slowly, put your utensil down, don't just randomly eat. Be aware of what portions look like what you pour out for cereal in the morning. How much is that? The cereal companies think that we pour out 2 servings. So anyway, I talked about this already, so I don't need to talk about that. Okay, yeah, be aware of grazing. There's nothing wrong with having snacks, but be aware of grazing. You can get a lot of calories in that way. So it's not what you do once in a while, it's an overall pattern of eating. And I think that's it. I thank you for your attention. It's 7 o'clock. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Any comments?
Somebody asked a question about grapeseed oil.
Yes.
What does that fit in?
It fits in, I believe, as mostly a monounsaturated fat, rapeseed oil. So it does fit in the diet as a reasonable source of fat. Yeah.
So that and my olive oil is more or less the same on this chart.
Yeah.
And get rid of coconut oil.
Yeah,
It
or
was so good to use in popping popcorn.
yeah. Oh, yeah, that was one of the first ones that Center for Science and the Public Interest kind of went after, was the maybe popcorn, I believe, with coconut oil.
Is that one of those swirly cake things?
Yeah,
that you do on the,
yeah.
and just put in a tablespoon of coconut oil and then your popcorn and then no butter, just a little bit of white salt.
Yeah, but here's the other thing too. You can definitely pick where you want to kind of spend your saturated fat, and if you choose to have it in coconut oil as opposed to bacon or butter, you know,
See,
you can
I'm
do
not
that.
a fat eater, is my thing. I just,
Yeah. Okay.
so I think
Except for
having
the oil,
popcorn with coconut oil once a week isn't the end of the world.
right?
So are all cheeses created equal in terms of saturated fat? Because I had heard that hard cheeses like Parmesan cheese is a whole lot less than something like cheddar.
Yeah. I would just check the label.
Okay,
You know, that'll give you that information. I know that, you know, some of the reduced fat cheeses have 5 grams of fat and about 3 grams of saturated fat. But, you know, just, so you could kind of keep that in mind, like a high fat protein is about 8 grams of fat, 8 to 10 grams of fat, and medium is about 5. So, yeah. So. Plus Parmesan cheese probably a little goes a long way too, you know,
Yeah.
as far as flavor, so, yeah.
Did you explain why peas are on the starch side of the plate?
Probably, you know, starchy vegetables sometimes end up on the starch side of things, even though they're a vegetable. And that is considered a starchier type of vegetable, kind of like squash.
there's a whole bunch of diets, especially if you're concerned about belly fat, where these vegetables that are on the starch side, they say you can't eat that for the first week when you're cleaning out
Oh.
your system,
Mhm.
or 2 weeks. You need to be eating things that aren't, whether they're talking glycemic or whether they're talking other things, starch, you know, you're getting carbs from those vegetables.
Mm-hmm, yeah. That would be another whole topic, glycemic index. Definitely.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Yeah, thanks, appreciate it.
Great audience.
Is this your apple crisp?
It's Mary.
So we can decide with that wind into something more.
Yeah.
Do you have the recipe
I
for the
do.
apple stuff?
I do have the recipe, and I wanted to explain it a little bit. This was just a general apple crisp recipe, and I modified it. Actually what I did was add apples that were a little bit sweeter and then cut down on the other sweetness. So I started out using some Haraldsons, but they were not sweet enough. So I substituted Sweet Tango, which the parentage of that is Honeycrisp and Zestar. And so it made things a little bit better. And I cut down on the added caramel topping, and I cut down on the margarine. And so the nutritionals came out to be, that is 12 servings, and it's 180 calories per serving. So I thought that wasn't too bad. So a serving, I don't know what the size of a serving is, but that 13 by 9 pan is 12. Now I am going to look up rapeseed oil because now I'm second guessing myself. So anyway, so as you're passing that around, yeah. Might be one of those